Welcome to the Curious Conversations Collaborative with your hosts Karen Revell and Tessa van Keeken. We hope by listening to these conversations you will gain insight, awareness, perspective, inspiration and motivation to create a career or business and life that lights you up and brings you happiness and joy.
How are you? How are you?
I'm good. We're getting there. The internet was playing us up a little bit today, but
yeah, I know a little bit of issues getting around, but anyway, here we are. So that's good. So
yeah.
What were we going to talk about today?
Okay, today was all about collaboration, which is what we're doing here, versus competition. And I think the fact that we've seen over the years, I think this whole idea, both in the corporate world and in the business world, in terms of like especially in the online world, I feel like there's been this really strong element of competition. Like you've got to beat someone else, you've got to be the best, and that's not a bad thing in certain ways. But I think there's also a big advantage in being able to collaborate and to not see other people in your industry, your peer group, whatever, as competition that you've got to beat. There is such a huge advantage of pooling your knowledge, your resources, whatever, coming together and collaborating on a project or anything, even in your business, to move forward.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, for me, that's so true. I think, particularly when I started my own business, like in the beginning, I really fell into that, really thinking like, oh, but there's so many other coaches and so many other Reiki practitioners or meditation teachers out there. So, it's this kind of idea of like, that as if there is like only a certain number of people and we're all going for the same clients or something, and you need to do something to compete with the others over clients or over your space. In the entrepreneur world or something like that, or in the area that you're working in. And I know we're going to talk about this another time more in depth, but I think that for me started to become then that rather being focused on what I am offering, I looked more at what others were also doing and trying to compare myself to that, or thinking, should I do it that way if someone else was successful, or or even like this that you feel like, oh, maybe I shouldn't share this knowledge or what I'm doing, because what if they are using it and I lose out? So you're starting to really think in a kind of lose-lose way, or in a win-lose way, instead of thinking that and what I noticed for me anyway was also that the people that are interested in the type of work that we do, like particularly for me, and I know you're doing this as well, around mindset and around personal growth, that there's so many people out there that haven't actually experienced that so that when you start working together, you're actually reaching way more people, and then within that, people will find the person that is best for them to work with. So I think in a way, it actually, you're reaching way more people, and you're actually the actually good that you're also trying to do beyond your actual work is actually, the ripple effect is much larger when you work together.
Yeah, that's bringing up two things for me. The first one that you mentioned there was really about having a mindset around lack and scarcity, and feeling that I've got to get this like client or whatever, versus like someone else is going to get them and I'm trying to compete against them to get them first or whatever. So that that's one aspect of what you're saying. I think the other aspect is, and it comes from the old adage, people buy people. And I remember once going to a networking event where I was actually the speaker, but we had thick snow outside and not many people turned up. And I ended up turning up, and I was doing a talk all about sort of more personal development side rather than business. And there was about 8 people at the talk. That was it. Yeah. And every single one of them was another coach. And I was just thinking, oh my God. But what came out of that for me is, as we got into a discussion after my talk, was how all of us had different trainings, we had different perspectives, and if someone else was coming in then who was looking for, just a person, I'll say but a coach, a more generalist coach, then all of us had different things that we brought that someone would be drawn to. So partly that would be our own personality, but partly that would be our own experience and story and, life challenges and that. So even though we could, if you have one person, we could have all helped them, they would be drawn to who they feel is the right match for them. And I think when you start looking at it from that point of view, you realise that you're not all out trying to get this one person. This person has the choice. And what you need to do is stand in your own sort of power and presence, and then and this is where I think attraction comes in terms of marketing or getting what you want, which we can talk about another time. That can be another subject. But I think that's something that's really comes out for me is that that it's not a lack mentality, that we need to be fighting and competing for the same people or resources or whatever, and that when we come together and collaborate, we add. It's what's the word when 2 and 2 makes 5? I can't think of the word right now, but
the sum is more than the parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we have joined forces with this to come together to collaborate on these conversations and in some of the ways that we're working. But I know many years ago, about 5 years ago, I was part of a networking group there, a women's networking group, and we decided there was 5 of us who joined forces under one umbrella. Yeah. And I was a business coach. There was someone who was like a VA admin person. There was someone who did online marketing. Another one did like graphic design and things like that. So we came together and we ran a series of lectures or like workshops for people to come to, where they got the benefit of talks from all of us and knowledge, and then they could come and afterwards come up and have like little mini one-to-ones with us to see where they needed to focus on their business. So again, that was a collaboration that added a lot to the people that were coming to those workshops. It made it fun for us because we were working together. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. I think especially for small business owners, I think there's a lot of people out there trying to do everything on their own, and it can become quite isolated.
And I think that's, sorry to just hang it, I think that's it, isn't it? It's not just for what you're doing, but it's also for yourself to like that, particularly in the kind of work that we do, where you can become quite isolated. And I know, like, I was trained in the past as well as a social worker, where if you're working as a social worker, you're expected to also be part of a professional body or a professional organization where you come together with other social workers to talk about your practice, to go over how you work. Like they call it actually intervision. So yes, you have to have supervision from someone, like a manager or team leader or whatever. But you also have to have intervision with colleague social workers to really have that kind of peer support, but also to exchange ideas, because someone else always can look at something slightly different, and you can learn a lot from that as well. So the other cliche of like two know more than one. So I think sometimes, particular as coaches and healers also, that sometimes, and particularly if we start our own business and do our own things, that we get that isolation and to kind of think we need to do it all alone. And then again, that kind of like, I need to be the best. I need to be the best coach or the best Reiki healer, because then people will come, instead of seeing that if you work together, that then there's that opportunity for you to learn a lot more, to actually become better, but not in a way as a best, but more in a better together. And also then that from that, the more unique you are, the more you stay true to your way of doing it, that then you also, people that are looking for, whether it's a business coach or a mindset coach or a Reiki healer, that then they have that, because you give your unique strengths, that then they can choose the one that suits them best. And again, that is only possible when you start collaborating.
Yeah. And I think it's also, it's true in a corporate environment as well. I know that when I was in corporate, I enjoyed being part of the team. Yeah. And then as you climb the corporate ladder, you become the manager and then the senior leader and that. And it's kind of like you start with, even though you've got your team, and that can be fun and you can employ people that are, a good fit and that, but you suddenly, because you step up a level and then up another level, it's like you become more isolated from them, or you have to have a certain presence. And then I personally found that with your peer group, as you get higher, depending on the organization and the culture, and it's really interesting because I remember the company I worked with in my most senior position, the culture changed, and I felt that it was very much like competition at that level, and you were competing and trying to prove yourself, if you like. Whereas I then went somewhere else where, even at that senior level, that culture was just very much a more collaborative way of working. So I do think even in corporate world, it's not just in like the entrepreneurial world, that and it's interesting as well. I've heard people talk about it being masculine versus feminine. And I know that that's not about being male versus female.
No.
So much, but I think there is something about perhaps business has come from men, because women have only been working I don't know, maybe women have been working a long time, but actually having that sort of freedom to
and also being able to actually climb up, like not just to do some like not just being the secretary or the
exactly. And that I think, so from that point of view, business has been a more masculine type of construct. So it's like now maybe there is a shift because more women are coming in, and that's not to say that men can't be collaborative as well, because they can. I absolutely see that.
I think they very much have that side as well. Like, again, we all have, of course, the more feminine or the softer side, and the more stronger, the more kind of the harsh, if you like, side, or the competitive side, men and women. And I think you can see this very much in corporate, where sometimes certain senior women can be way harder and way more competitive than some other men, because nearly it's like even more that feeling of being a woman, even more feeling of I have to prove myself. And I thought it was very interesting that you said that, because I think here in the Netherlands, I actually last year worked with a client who worked for a big American multinational, where a lot of from the American management, there came a lot of pressure to be in that more competitive state. And my client actually was a man who really, really struggled with that, because he really felt like, and what it did to him and a lot of his colleagues was this feeling of constantly having to be wary, like, what information do I show, even with my colleagues, because what if they're trying to cut me off and push me aside? And, so it kind of created a real nearly suspicion and
Yes, watching your back all the time.
yeah. And again,
And
that's coming
that
from
is that I was in, and definitely, and I would say, like, looking back at it now, I mean, I guess it's a long time ago, but looking back at it now, I know that I had to be like that, and I'm not really a competitive person at all, but yeah, it's that whole being strong, being perhaps more masculine in your energy, being not competitive, but like exactly watching your back and not giving away so much. Although I find that really hard because I'm just naturally an open person. But yeah, it is kind of like trying to be or acting in a way that's not your natural self. And yeah, I think that's when it can cause a lot of stress for people.
Yeah, and I'm in contact with a lot of women who often feel that as a, you know, we talk about the female versus male, but I do think, and I really, really see that. So I always mention that I actually have worked with a lot of men who struggled with that too, who actually preferred to also, you know, they also struggled under that idea of that you're not allowed. That strong means never being sensitive or vulnerable. Whereas like one of the most important things for me that I will help people with as well is to see that, like, if you embrace your inner sensitivity and your vulnerability, that actually is a strength. And again, we can talk about that more in depth another time, but I think it's very much linked to that idea of competition versus collaboration, that because to collaborate you have to have a level of openness and vulnerability too, and that can be very scary sometimes because and also I think, like, we all have experience where we collaborate with someone where they do take advantage of us. So it's not that that never happens. It is true that there is a risk of that sometimes, but it is that idea of, are you not going to collaborate because there is a risk of someone taking advantage, or that, like, you know. So for me, actually, someone in a totally different area once said around trust, they said, trust is not something you earn. Trust is something that should be given until it's broken. And I really loved that, but because for me, that's that at the root of that idea, competition versus collaboration, that you always trust in the other people in that collaboration. But if, of course, if someone then does take advantage, you can still, you know, you can still put your boundaries up around that, and not so much go back into competition, but still, you know, treat them a little bit more with be a bit more restrained around maybe what you hear them.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah. So just to wrap up then, is there any ways that you see, because we've kind of discussed this as if collaboration is always better, but are there any situations where perhaps you think that maybe competition is a good thing? It's like, we're not really kind of saying, oh, you can't be competitive, but you know, I think we just need to sort of highlight that there are places where competition is good as well.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I think competition in the traditional way of somebody, like if it's linked to only one person being able to win or be the best, personally, I find it very hard to see that as a positive. But I think if we really look at what competition is around becoming, if you see it like in a way, I see that it doesn't have to be separate. It doesn't have to be either or. You can also within collaboration strive to be better together, but together instead of just me on my own. So I think it's like, it's nearly, if you think of playing a game, just like with the family, just a board game or whatever game, that if people are only focused on themselves and winning, it's actually not very fun. It actually becomes very annoying, you know, because then, you know, people get cross when they're behind or when they lose, and it's not a fun evening. Whereas now, like, actually I have to give you one example because it's just so funny. Personally, I think it's nice when people try to win, because otherwise the game becomes kind of boring, but are also able to still enjoy if someone else does well too, in the sense of more as the having a fun evening. Now the only people I wanted to mention is like my grandparents actually, and it always annoyed the hell out of me when watching it. They played Scrabble completely open, and they would constantly help each other with each round. Now, again, it was actually very fun and very sweet, but as far as a game go in general, it's actually nice to have it. So if you talk about competition, I would say, like, yes, there can be some, because this can be very, you know, a little bit annoying too. So I think, yeah, that's just something I want to share, because it illustrates much. But I have been with people playing a game, and you know, they get so cross when losing, and it's actually not fun to play anymore. So I think it's the way you look at competition, really.
Absolutely, that's what I was going to say, because I think, especially if you look in sports, I mean, you look at most people, you know, even in team sports, yeah, absolutely, they're actually working on themselves to be the best they can be. They're working collaboratively with their team to make sure that the team becomes better. And I think in the moment of the game, they're like really focused on winning.
Yeah.
However, it's what you do when you've won in that moment of victory or loss or whatever. It's like how you react to that afterwards, and it's being big enough, a strong enough leader to actually say, okay, that's it, and that was fine. And you know, it's not like a life and death battle, but I think some people do treat competition like that, and that's when it becomes you know, I win, you lose type of scenario. And I think that's when competition can become quite a negative trait.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, that competition is very often portrayed as that, isn't it? Like, if you think even in school, if children are marked in a way of like that only one person can be the best of the class, but also that if you're not, that you're constantly being told that you're not good enough because you're not on that level. Instead, like, then again, you go into that competition where only one person can be the best and everything else is not good enough. And I think then it can be actually like what we talked about in that corporate world, where people start feeling suspicious and watching their back, and it becomes, there's actually a lack of trust and that feeling of scarcity, which, you know, then it has a not such a good effect. Whereas, like, I think the sports you mentioned is a great example, because that's obviously very competitive. Yet even in a single sport, if you think of tennis, the good matches are the ones where people also actually really admire each other. If you look at Wimbledon, for instance, like, you know, that the top matches, you can see that people, now, of course, they don't want the other person to win. They're not going to help them win. But at the same time, they want a good opponent. They want together also create a good match. And you can see that, because only once in a while you get a person who doesn't do that and really just does their own thing. And you can see the players don't enjoy it anymore. The audience doesn't enjoy it. And if people always played like that, probably there wouldn't be tennis in a few years down the road, because it wouldn't, you know, you need that collaboration together to create a good match as well. And I think that shows it.
And I think what you're saying there is that the competition against someone else is the best way, is when it makes you grow as an individual.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. And I think it's the same like what we do as coaches. Again, of course, in a way, there is some element of competition between people doing the same type of work. But if you do it from a collaborative space where you also really work together, so that the bigger picture, the umbrella of the work we bring out into the world grows and becomes better, and we ourselves come better, that is a very different way than closing yourself off and being very closed-minded and saying, no, this is mine and you can't see it because you might run with it or something. So I think that, to me, is the difference. It's like, and some people are a bit more competitive and some people are more collaborative or whatever, but as a bigger thing, it's nearly that it's two sides of the same coin rather than that it's complete opposites.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I think there's space for both. Neither's good or bad, but it's how you react and how you grow from it.
Yeah. Wow, that's a very interesting conversation, and I think lots of things came up. Like I think definitely the downfall of trying to compare too much, and the thing around having that confidence to really be your unique self. I think that are maybe topics that we can talk about another time.
And maybe being vulnerable in your leadership.
Yes, the vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. Yeah, so I think that's like already things that came up for me that I think that will be lovely to talk about. And I think, of course, if anyone is watching this and has any ideas, anything that came up that they want to share, it's either or both of us, or something that they would really like us to talk about, then please let us know. But anyway, very interesting topic, and great to talk to you as usual. So I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, okay.
See you then. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.